Web Security Unleashed, a practical guide to the OWASP Top 10 Risks. Good morning, world. How many of you started your day by checking your email, scrolling through social media, or perhaps ordering that first cup of coffee online? Chances are, nearly all of us. Our lives are inextricably linked to the internet, and specifically to web applications. From banking to healthcare, shopping to connecting with loved ones, these digital platforms are the invisible threads weaving together the fabric of modern society. They offer unparalleled convenience, connect us globally, and have fundamentally reshaped how we live, work, and play. But every frontier, no matter how exciting, comes with its own unique set of perils. Just as early pioneers had to navigate treacherous landscapes and unforeseen dangers, we in the digital age face a new kind of wilderness: the cyber landscape. And in this realm, web applications, despite their immense utility, often represent the most exposed and tempting targets for digital bandits, spies, and saboteurs, collectively known as cyber attackers. You see, a web application isn't just a shiny interface you interact with. It's a complex ecosystem of code, databases, servers, and networks, all working in concert. Every click, every form submission, every loaded image triggers a flurry of intricate operations behind the scenes. And with that complexity comes vulnerability. A single oversight in design, a mere misstep in configuration, or a tiny crack in the code can become an open invitation for an attacker to step in and wreak havoc. Consider this. You trust your bank's website with your life savings, your doctor's portal with your most sensitive health data, and your favorite online retailer with your credit card details. This trust is foundational, but it's often unspoken and presumed. When that trust is breached, the consequences can be catastrophic, not just for the individual but for entire businesses, even economies. We've all seen the headlines. Megacorporations humbled by massive data breaches that expose millions of customer records. Hospitals brought to their knees by ransomware attacks that encrypt critical patient files. Small businesses ruined overnight because their online store was compromised, leading to financial losses and irreversible reputational damage. These aren't isolated incidents, they are daily occurrences. They are the grim reminders that the digital frontier, for all its wonders, is also a minefield. This isn't a book to frighten you, but to empower you. To navigate any minefield successfully, you need a map and an understanding of the dangers. The map we'll use is the OWASP Top 10, a globally recognized standard for the most critical web application security risks. OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project, is a nonprofit foundation that works to improve the security of software. Their Top 10 list isn't just an abstract academic exercise. It's a living document distilled from years of real-world attacks and vulnerabilities, representing the most common and dangerous pitfalls in web application security. In the coming chapters, we will embark on a journey to decode each of these top risks. We'll explore what they are in simple terms, how they manifest themselves, how real attackers exploit them, and most importantly, what practical steps you, whether you're a developer, a business owner, a security professional, or simply a concerned digital citizen, can take to protect yourself and your digital assets. We'll look at real-world examples, not with a sense of dread, but with a focus on learning and prevention. My goal is to demystify web security, to translate highly technical concepts into clear, actionable insights. You won't need to be a coding genius or a seasoned hacker to understand this book. My commitment is to explain, illustrate, and empower. Because ultimately, web security isn't just about lines of code or complex algorithms. It's about protecting privacy, preserving trust, and building a safer digital future for everyone. Let's begin our exploration and confidently navigate the digital minefield together. In our last chapter, we established why web security is not just a technical concern, but a fundamental societal imperative. We acknowledged the vast landscape of digital opportunities and the lurking shadows of cyber threats. Now, it's time to equip ourselves with the right tools and a reliable map to navigate this terrain. That map, our essential compass, is provided by an organization called OWASP. So, what exactly is OWASP? OWASP stands for the Open Web Application Security Project. Think of it as a global, non-profit community dedicated to improving the security of software. Unlike a traditional company, OWASP doesn't sell products or services. Instead, it creates free, open-source tools, methodologies, and knowledge resources that help governments, educational institutions, and businesses around the world make their web applications more secure. It's a grassroots movement, fueled by thousands of security professionals, developers, and enthusiasts who contribute their expertise to the common good. One of OWASP's most well-known and impactful contributions is the OWASP Top 10. This isn't just a random list. It's a living document compiled by a group of leading security experts from around the globe. They analyze vast amounts of data, including actual breaches, industry surveys, and vulnerability disclosures, to identify the most critical and widespread web application security risks. The list is then periodically updated to reflect the evolving threat landscape. The most recent iteration, and the one we'll be focusing on in this book, was released in 2021. Why is this list so important? Imagine you're building a house. You wouldn't just start nailing boards together without considering the foundation, the roof, or potential weak points susceptible to wind or rain, right? Similarly, when building or operating web applications, you need to understand the most common and dangerous vulnerabilities. The OWASP Top 10 serves as a crucial starting point for any organization or individual looking to improve their web security posture. It acts as a baseline for education. It provides a common language and understanding for everyone, from CEOs to entry-level developers, about the most prevalent threats. A prioritization tool. For security teams with limited resources, it helps them focus their efforts on fixing the most critical weaknesses first, offering the biggest bang for their buck in terms of risk reduction. A design guide. Developers can use it as a checklist during the design and coding phases to bake in security from the start, rather than trying to patch it on later. A testing framework. Penetration testers and security auditors often use the Top 10 as a guide to ensure they're looking for the most common and impactful vulnerabilities in applications. It's important to understand that the OWASP Top 10 is not an exhaustive list of all possible web security vulnerabilities. The digital world is too vast and complex for any single list to cover everything. Instead, think of it as the greatest hits album of web application security flaws. These are the flaws that, time and again, lead to significant data breaches, financial losses, and reputational damage. They represent a high percentage of the real-world attacks organizations face. You might be wondering, if these risks are so well known, why do they keep appearing? The answer is multifaceted. Sometimes it's a lack of awareness or training among developers. Other times, it's pressure to release features quickly, leading to security being an afterthought. It can also be due to the sheer complexity of modern web applications, the difficulty of managing third-party components, or simply human error. In the chapters that follow, we will take a deep dive into each of the OWASP Top 10 risks from the 2021 list. We'll give each risk its own dedicated chapter, dissecting it with simplicity and clarity. For each item, we will define the risk in easy-to-understand terms, illustrate how it operates with straightforward examples and analogies, explore real-world case studies of breaches that occurred because of this specific vulnerability, explain the potential impact and ramifications for individuals and businesses, provide practical, actionable mitigation strategies that can be implemented to defend against these threats. By the end of this journey, you won't just know what the OWASP Top 10 risks are. You'll understand why they are significant, how they are exploited, and most importantly, what you can do to build or use web applications more securely. This knowledge is your shield, your tool, and your compass in the ever-evolving digital frontier. Let's turn the page and uncover the first critical risk on our list. Chapter 3, The Locked Doors of the Digital World. Understanding Broken Access Control. Imagine you're checking into a hotel. You receive a key card, unique to your room. You expect that card to open only your room and perhaps common areas like the lobby or gym. You wouldn't expect it to open the room next door, or even worse, the hotel manager's private office, would you? If it did, that would be a fundamental breakdown of the hotel's security system. In the digital world, this breakdown is known as broken access control. It's the #1 web application security risk on the OWASP Top 10 list for 2021, and for good reason. At its core, access control is how a web application determines what a user is allowed to do. It checks two things: authentication, who you are, e.g., your username and password, and authorization, what you're allowed to do, e.g., are you an administrator, a regular user, or a guest? When authorization fails, either through incorrect implementation or misconfiguration, it opens the door for attackers to bypass security checks, gain unauthorized access, and potentially take over user accounts, view private data, or even perform administrative functions. How it happens: digital keycards gone astray. Broken access control can manifest in many forms, often subtly. Direct object references. This is like your hotel keycard being able to guess the sequence for the room next door. In a web application, this happens when a user directly requests a specific piece of data or a file by changing a number or name in the web address, the URL. For example, if you view your bank statement, the URL might look like yourbank.com/account/statement?id equals 12,345. If an attacker simply changes ID equals 12,345 to ID equals 12,346, and can then see someone else's statement, that's a direct object reference vulnerability. The application failed to check if the user is authorized to view the specific statement requested by ID equals 12,346. Privilege escalation. This is akin to a guest's keycard suddenly granting them access to the hotel manager's office. Vertical privilege escalation. A regular user gains access to functions or data reserved for higher privileged users, like an administrator. This could involve manipulating a request to access an admin section they shouldn't see, or changing a user role field in a form submission. Horizontal privilege escalation. A user gains access to resources belonging to another user of the same privilege level. Our bank statement example above, ID equals 12,346, is a classic horizontal escalation, bypassing access checks. Sometimes, developers secure certain functions by hiding them in the user interface or making them inaccessible via direct links. However, attackers can often bypass these client-side restrictions by directly sending requests to the server or by manipulating client-side code. For instance, if a delete account button is simply hidden for regular users, an attacker might still be able to construct the specific request to delete an account if the server-side checks aren't robust. Misconfigurations. Access control can also break due to incorrect server or application settings. For example, leaving default administrator accounts active with well-known passwords, or publicly exposing directories on a web server that contain sensitive files like configuration backups or user uploads. Real-world examples: when digital doors swing open. Countless breaches have stemmed from broken access control. One common simplified scenario involves online learning platforms or social networks. An attacker discovers that by just changing a user ID in the URL, they can view private profiles, messages, or assignments of other students or users without authentication. This has happened repeatedly across various platforms, leading to privacy violations and unauthorized data access. Another well-known type of incident involves administrators failing to properly secure content management systems or file servers. There have been cases where entire corporate document repositories, full of sensitive internal memos, financial reports, and employee data, were accessible to anyone who knew the public web address for the directory, simply because no access controls were properly set up. It's like leaving the hotel's safe wide open in the lobby. Impact: the high cost of open doors. The consequences of broken access control can be severe. Data breach. Attackers can access, copy, or alter sensitive user data, intellectual property, or confidential business information. This can lead to identity theft, financial fraud, and loss of competitive advantage. System integrity compromise. Unauthorized users might modify, delete, or deface websites, leading to service disruption and reputational damage. Full system takeover. In severe cases, an attacker might escalate their privileges to become an administrator, gaining complete control over the application and potentially the underlying server infrastructure. Reputational damage and regulatory fines. Businesses that suffer such breaches face a loss of customer trust, negative publicity, and potential fines from regulatory bodies like those enforcing data privacy laws like GDPR or HIPAA. Mitigation strategies. Bolting down the digital doors. Preventing broken access control requires a fundamental shift towards a deny-by-default security posture. Strong server-side enforcement. This is the golden rule. Never trust the information sent from the user's browser, client-side, for authorization decisions. All access control checks must be performed on the server every time a user tries to access a resource or perform an action. The server must verify that the authenticated user is authorized for that specific request. Deny by default principle. Implement authorization mechanisms that, by default, deny all access unless specific permissions are explicitly granted. This means if a developer forgets to add an access control rule, the action will be blocked, not allowed. Centralized access control. Use a single, well-tested, and consistent access control component or library across the entire application. This avoids scattered ad hoc access control logic that is prone to errors. Attribute-based access control. Instead of just checking roles, e.g., admin or user, consider more granular rules based on attributes. What type of data is being accessed, who owns it, what time it is, and what the user's IP address is. Logging and monitoring. Implement robust logging of all failed access attempts. Regularly review these logs for suspicious patterns, as they often indicate an attacker trying to bypass access controls. Regular testing. Conduct thorough manual and automated security testing, including penetration testing, to identify and close any authorization loopholes. Actively try to perform actions you shouldn't be allowed to do. Testing and detection. Finding the gaps. Detecting broken access control involves two main approaches: manual testing and automated tools. Manually, security professionals will try to access restricted URLs, change numerical IDs and parameters, try to invoke administrative functions while logged in as a regular user, or change roles in their requests. Automated tools can also scan applications for common patterns of insecure direct object references or missing authorization checks. Though complex business logic vulnerabilities often require human ingenuity to uncover. Key takeaways: your responsibility. Broken access control is a pervasive and incredibly dangerous vulnerability because it directly undermines the fundamental concept of user permissions. It's often not about sophisticated hacking techniques, but rather about simple oversight in applying correct authorization logic. By understanding this risk and implementing strong server-side access controls, adopting a deny-by-default mindset, and rigorously testing your applications, you can significantly reduce the chances of your digital doors swinging open for unauthorized guests. The integrity of your data and the trust of your users depend on it. Chapter 4: The Language of Secrets, Cryptographic Failures and What They Reveal. Think about a spy movie. The protagonist needs to send a top-secret message. They wouldn't just scribble it on a napkin and hand it over, would they? No, they'd use a complex cipher, a special code, or a decryption key to ensure only the intended recipient could understand it. This process of scrambling information to make it unreadable to unauthorized parties is called cryptography. It's the art and science of securing communications and data. In the digital world, cryptography is everywhere. It protects your online banking transactions, your private messages, your stored passwords, and countless other pieces of sensitive information. When cryptography is applied correctly, it's one of the strongest defenses against data breaches. However, when it fails or is implemented poorly, it becomes cryptographic failures the number 2 risk on the OWASP Top 10 list for 2021. This means sensitive data is exposed, not because a hacker broke through a firewall, but because the secret language used to protect it was flawed or wasn't spoken at all. How it happens when secrets aren't so secret. Cryptographic failures aren't usually about attackers breaking sophisticated encryption algorithms. That's incredibly difficult for modern, well-implemented crypto. Instead, these failures often stem from lack of encryption, the most basic failure. Sensitive data, like credit card numbers, health records, login credentials, or personal identifiable information, PE, is stored or transmitted in plain text, meaning it's completely unencrypted and readable by anyone who gains access. Imagine writing your spy message directly on the napkin for all to see. Weak, outdated, or broken cryptographic algorithms, using algorithms that are known to have weaknesses or have been deprecated. Examples include older hashing algorithms like MD5 or SHA-1 for password storage, which are prone to collision attacks, where different inputs can produce the same hash, or outdated encryption protocols. This is like using a simple substitute cipher for your spy message that an amateur could easily crack. Improper key management. Cryptographic keys are like the literal keys to your encrypted data. If these keys are easily guessable, hard-coded directly into application code, stored in insecure locations, or never changed, the encryption becomes useless. It's like locking your diary but taping the key to the back cover. Misconfiguration of SSL/TLS. Secure Sockets Layer, SSL, and its successor Transport Layer Security, TLS, are protocols that encrypt traffic between your web browser and a website. If these are misconfigured, they might use weak cipher suites, outdated protocols, or invalid certificates, making the encrypted connection vulnerable to eavesdropping or manipulation. Improper use of cryptography. Even strong algorithms can be rendered ineffective if not used correctly. For example, simply hashing a password without salting it, adding a unique, random string of data before hashing, makes it susceptible to precomputed attacks using rainbow tables. Real-world examples. When trust evaporates. A classic example of cryptographic failures can be seen in the numerous data breaches where customer passwords were stolen. Before modern best practices, many websites stored user passwords using only simple hashing algorithms like MD5 or SHA-1, or worse, even plain text. When these databases were compromised, attackers could hash the passwords or simply read them, then use these credentials to access other online accounts. The victims had a practice known as credential stuffing, since many users reuse passwords. While complex, the Equifax breach of 2017 indirectly touches on this. While the primary vulnerability was an unpatched server, the sheer volume of sensitive unencrypted PII, including social security numbers, birth dates, addresses, and driver's license numbers, that was exposed highlighted a failure in properly categorizing, securing, and encrypting sensitive data at rest. If such data wasn't encrypted, or the encryption keys were easily accessible, it directly contributes to cryptographic failures. Even if it was encrypted, the way the data was mishandled post-breach, and the lack of proper data segmentation and key management underscores the importance of this OWASP category. Countless smaller incidents occur daily where databases containing sensitive customer data are found exposed on the internet, typically due to misconfiguration or lack of encryption. Impact. The digital echoes of betrayal. The consequences of cryptographic failures are severe and long-lasting. Data breach. Exposure of sensitive user information, financial data, intellectual property, and trade secrets to unauthorized parties. Identity theft and financial fraud. Stolen PII and financial details can be used for fraudulent activities. Reputational damage and loss of trust. Businesses suffer significant reputational harm, leading to customer churn and loss of revenue. Legal and regulatory fines. Breaches often result in hefty fines under data protection regulations, e.g., GDPR, CCPA, HIPAA. Compromise of system integrity. In some cases, weak cryptography can allow attackers to tamper with data without detection. Mitigation strategies. Forging an unbreakable code. Protecting sensitive data through robust cryptography requires a comprehensive approach. Encrypt all sensitive data in transit and at rest. In transit, always use TLS SSL for all web traffic, HTTPS. Ensure it's configured to use strong cipher suites and protocols, rejecting outdated versions. This encrypts data as it travels between your browser and the server. At rest, encrypt sensitive data stored in databases, file systems, and backups using strong encryption algorithms. Use strong, modern, industry-standard algorithms. Never try to create your own encryption algorithms, rolling your own crypto. Instead, leverage well-vetted, peer-reviewed, and widely adopted cryptographic libraries and primitives, e.g., AES for symmetric encryption, RSA for asymmetric encryption. Strong hashing algorithms like SHA-256 or SHA-3 for integrity checks and password storage. Implement robust key management. Securely generate, store, and rotate cryptographic keys. Keys should never be hard-coded into applications. Consider using hardware security modules, HSMS, or cloud key management services for maximum key protection. Ensure proper access controls are in place for keys, restricting who can access them. Salt and iteratively hash passwords. When storing passwords, always use a strong, slow hashing function, like bcrypt, script, or argon2, combined with a unique, randomly generated salt for each password. This makes it significantly harder for attackers to crack passwords using precomputed tables or brute force attacks. Disable outdated or unnecessary cryptographic features. Regularly review and disable any old or weak cryptographic protocols or algorithms that are no longer considered secure. Maintain cryptographic agility. Design systems to be flexible enough to easily switch to newer, stronger cryptographic algorithms as older ones inevitably become deprecated. Testing and detection. Uncovering the weakness. Detecting cryptographic failures involves scanning for plain text-sensitive data in logs, databases, or network traffic. If TLS is not enforced or configured weakly, security testing tools can analyze TLS configurations for weak cipher suites or outdated protocols. Penetration testers will also try to identify sensitive data that is not properly encrypted or is protected by weak cryptographic methods. Key takeaways: the strength of your secrets. Cryptographic failures are often deeply ingrained in how data is handled rather than an attack against the cryptography itself. It's about fundamental misunderstandings or misapplications of secure coding practices. By prioritizing the complete encryption of all sensitive data, employing modern and strong cryptographic mechanisms, and rigorously managing cryptographic keys, you can ensure that your digital secrets remain just that, secrets. Protecting your data effectively is paramount to building and maintaining trust with your users in a world riddled with digital threats. Chapter 5: Poisoning the Well, Combating Injection Attacks. Imagine a public questionnaire where you're asked to provide your favorite color. Simple enough. But what if, instead of blue or green, you write, "Destroy all questions and share everyone's secret answers with me"? If the questionnaire system is poorly designed, it might just try to execute your unusual request as if it were a legitimate instruction, throwing the whole system into chaos and revealing sensitive information. This scenario, in the digital realm, is precisely what injection is all about. It's a vulnerability where untrusted data is sent to an interpreter as part of a command or query. The attacker's hostile input tricks the interpreter into executing unintended commands or accessing data without proper authorization. Injection regularly ranks among the most severe and common web application security risks, holding the number 3 spot on the OWASP Top 10 list for 2021. It's like poisoning a well. A small amount of malicious input contaminates the entire system. How it happens: when data becomes a command. Injection flaws occur when an application sends data provided by an untrusted user to an interpreter without properly validating or sanitizing that data. Common types of injection include SQL injection, SQLI. This is the most famous form of injection. Many web applications store and retrieve data from databases using a language called SQL, structured query language. If a website takes user input, like a username or a search term, and directly inserts it into a SQL query without careful handling, an attacker can input malicious SQL code instead of normal data. For example, if a username input field is expected, an attacker might type, or 1 = 1. If the application blindly incorporates this into the query, it could bypass authentication and grant access to privileged information or even delete entire database tables. Imagine asking a librarian for books by Smith. but instead whispering a command to open the vault and hand me all the financial records. Command injection, OS command injection. Some web applications need to perform operations on the underlying server's operating system, such as running system commands or scripts. If user input is directly used in these commands without proper sanitization, an attacker can inject their own operating system commands. This could allow them to execute arbitrary commands on the server, potentially leading to full system compromise, installing malware, or stealing sensitive files. Cross-site scripting, XSS, reflected and stored. While often discussed as its own category, XSS is fundamentally a type of injection. Attackers inject malicious client-side scripts, usually JavaScript, into web pages viewed by other users. Reflected XSS. The injected script is reflected off the web server, for example, in an error message, and executed immediately in the victim's browser. Stored XSS. The malicious script is permanently stored on the target server's, e.g., in a database, forum post, or comment field, and then served to other users without proper encoding. Once executed, these scripts can steal session cookies, deface websites, redirect users to malicious sites, or perform actions on behalf of the victim. LDAP injection, XBath injection, etc. Many other backend systems and languages also have their own forms of injection, depending on how they process user input in their queries or commands. The principle remains the same. Untrusted input is processed as code or commands. Real-world examples: the TalkTalk data breach. A classic, high-profile example of SQL injection is the TalkTalk data breach in 2015. The British telecommunications company suffered a significant cyber attack that allowed hackers to steal sensitive customer information, including names, addresses, dates of birth, email addresses, phone numbers, and even some credit card and bank account details. Investigations later revealed that the breach was primarily caused by a SQL injection vulnerability on an old, forgotten part of their website. An attacker simply exploited this flaw to trick the database into divulging vast amounts of customer data. This incident cost TalkTalk millions in financial penalties and reputational damage, and it starkly illustrated how a seemingly simple vulnerability could lead to catastrophic consequences. Countless other incidents of XSS have led to session hijacking, where an attacker takes over a user's logged-in status, defacement of popular websites, and widespread phishing campaigns. Impact: the contagion of compromise. The consequences of a successful injection attack can range from severe data breaches to complete system compromise, total data loss, or exfiltration. Attackers can read, modify, or delete entire databases, including sensitive customer data, financial records, and intellectual property. Authentication bypass: gaining access to user accounts or administrative panels without proper credentials. System takeover: executing arbitrary commands on the server, command injection, which can lead to installing malware, creating new user accounts, or completely compromising the web server. Website defacement: malicious content injected into a website can damage brand reputation. Session hijacking: for XSS, attackers can steal session tokens, allowing them to impersonate logged-in users. Client-side attacks: malicious scripts targeting the end user's browser can lead to phishing, malware downloads, or other client-side attacks. Mitigation strategies: sealing the well. Preventing injection attacks requires a rigorous, multi-layered approach that primarily focuses on input validation and output encoding. Use parameterized queries for SQL injection. This is the single most effective defense against SQL injection. Instead of directly concatenating user input into SQL queries, use prepared statements or parameterized queries. These frameworks ensure that data provided by the user is treated purely as data, not as executable code. The database interprets the query structure separately from the provided values. Analogy: instead of telling the librarian, find books by user input, you tell the librarian, find books by a specific author, and then separately provide them with the author's name, ensuring that any malicious characters in the name are not misinterpreted as commands. Input validation: for all types of injection, validate and sanitize all user input before processing it. Whitelist validation: This is the strongest approach. Define what characters, formats, and lengths are allowed for each input field, e.g., only numbers for an age, only letters for a name. Reject anything that doesn't match. Blacklist validation, avoid alone. Trying to filter out known malicious characters is a weak defense, as attackers can often find ways to bypass such filters. Only use it as a secondary layer if absolutely necessary. Output encoding, for XSS. Any data retrieved from a database or user input that is then displayed back to a web page must be properly encoded for the context in which it will be rendered, e.g., HTML entity encoding, JavaScript encoding. This ensures that characters that could be interpreted as code are instead displayed as harmless text. For instance, if an attacker injects script tags, encoding would turn them into an LT, script, and GT, rendering them harmless. Principle of least privilege. Configure database users and system accounts with the minimum necessary permissions. For example, a web application should not connect to a database using an admin account that can delete tables, but rather an account that only has permissions to read and write the specific data it needs. Disable unnecessary functionality. Turn off features on the server or database that are not strictly required, such as shell commands in a SQL Server, to reduce the attack surface. Regularly update and patch. Keep all software components, including operating systems, web servers, database systems, and application frameworks, up to date with the latest security patches. Many vulnerabilities, once discovered, are quickly patched. Testing and detection, unearthing the malice. Injection vulnerabilities are often found through a combination of manual testing and automated tools. Manual penetration testing involves security experts systematically entering various forms of malicious input into every available input field, URL parameter, and HTTP header. Automated vulnerability scanners can discover many common injection flaws by sending predefined malicious payloads and analyzing the application's responses. Code review can also uncover patterns of insecure data handling. Key takeaways: trust no input. Injection remains a critical threat because it exploits a fundamental misunderstanding that all user input is benign data. The core message is this: never trust user input. Treat everything coming from an untrusted source, whether it's a URL parameter, a form field, or an HTTP header, as potentially malicious. By rigorously validating and sanitizing input, using parameterized queries, encoding output, and adopting the principle of least privilege, you can effectively seal the well and protect your applications from these pervasive and dangerous attacks. Chapter 6: Building on Sand, the Dangers of Insecure Design. Imagine you're looking at blueprints for a brand new building. The architect shows you a gorgeous structure, sleek and modern. But as you look closer, you notice something unsettling. The blueprint doesn't account for a strong foundation, or perhaps shows critical support beams made of flimsy material. You instinctively know that even if the construction workers do a perfect job following these plans, the building is inherently unstable and prone to collapse. In the digital world, this inherent instability is described as insecure design. It's the fourth item on the OWASP Top 10 list for 2021, and it's a departure from the previous categories we've discussed. Unlike broken access control or injection, which are often specific coding mistakes, insecure design refers to a lack of secure design, planning, or architecture. It's about fundamental flaws in the initial blueprint of a web application, making it vulnerable even if the code itself is technically well-written. It's building on sand because the structural integrity wasn't considered from the ground up. How it happens: flawed blueprints. Insecure design doesn't necessarily mean a vulnerability exists. Instead, it means there's a risk of vulnerabilities being introduced due to missing or ineffective security controls at the design and architectural level. These issues often arise from lack of threat modeling. Most commonly, secure design fails because potential threats and attack paths are not considered early in the development lifecycle. Developers and architects plan features, but don't actively think about how an attacker might misuse or bypass them. Absence of secure design principles. Basic security principles like least privilege, giving users only the permissions they absolutely need. Defense in depth, multiple layers of security, or secure by default. Defaulting to the most restrictive settings are not consistently applied throughout the design. Complex or overly permissive workflows. Design flaws can introduce loopholes in the application's business logic. For example, a multi-step financial transaction where the final step doesn't fully re-verify the previous step's data, or a password reset mechanism that relies solely on a single, easily guessable piece of information. Implicit trust. Designing systems that implicitly trust too much data, too many users, or too many internal components. For example, assuming that all internal network traffic is safe and doesn't need validation. Failure to account for attack scenarios, not designing against common attack patterns. For example, building a payment gateway without proper mechanisms to prevent double spending or price manipulation attacks. Real-world examples. Logic loopholes and overconfidence. Because insecure design is about fundamental flaws rather than specific bugs, concrete, single case studies are harder to pinpoint directly. However, many breaches indirectly tie back to design flaws. Consider a retail website's shopping cart and checkout process. A design flaw. Let's say a user adds an item to their cart, and the price is stored locally on their computer or within a temporary session variable without being re-verified on the server during checkout. An attacker could then manipulate that local price variable to pay a fraction of the actual cost for an item. This isn't a SQL injection or a misconfiguration. It's a flaw in how the transaction logic was designed. The initial design didn't consider that an attacker might tamper with the price at a later stage. Another example. A popular online service designed its password reset functionality to require only an email address. If an attacker also had access to a user's email account, perhaps through a separate phishing attack, they could then easily initiate a password reset and gain full control of the user's account on the service. The design lacked a second factor for verifying password resets, relying too heavily on email as the sole authentication mechanism for such a critical operation. While not a direct data breach cause, a good example of an insecure design principle is how some apps might handle user data deletion. If the design dictates that sensitive user data is merely flagged as deleted in a database but not actually purged, then an attacker who later gains database access could potentially retrieve deleted information. This is a design choice that carries security implications. Impact, systemic weakness, pervasive risk. The consequences of insecure design can be profound. Pervasive vulnerabilities. Design flaws can introduce vulnerabilities across multiple parts of an application, making them harder to patch and remediate. Fraud and financial loss. Loopholes in business logic can be exploited for financial fraud, as seen in the shopping cart example. Data exposure manipulation. If the design allows for implicit trust, sensitive data could be accessed or altered by unauthorized parties. Denial of service. Imperfect resource management or rate-limiting design can lead to easy DOS attacks. High remediation cost. Fixing design flaws inherently means reworking architecture, which is generally more expensive and time-consuming than fixing a coding bug. Reputational damage, loss of trust, and potential legal ramifications. Mitigation strategies, blueprint for security. Addressing insecure design requires a proactive approach, integrating security into every phase of the development lifecycle, starting from conception. Perform threat modeling. This is the most crucial step. Before writing any code, dedicate time to systematically identify potential threats, vulnerabilities, and attack surfaces. Ask questions like, what assets are we protecting? What could go wrong? How might an attacker exploit a feature? What are the trust boundaries? Tools like Stride, spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, escalation of privilege can help structure this process. Define and implement secure design patterns. Adopt a library of known secure design patterns and principles, e.g., principle of least privilege, separation of duties, defense in depth, fail-secure states, and enforce their use. Establish and validate security requirements. Make security a first-class requirement alongside functional requirements. For every feature, define its security implications and how potential risks will be mitigated. architectural review for security, have security experts review the application's architecture and design before development begins. This catches fundamental flaws early. Utilize secure design libraries and frameworks. Leverage well-vetted, secure components, libraries, and frameworks that have security built into their core. Avoid rolling your own security mechanisms. Decompose the application. Break down complex systems into smaller, independent, and verifiable modules. This simplifies security analysis and reduces the blast radius of any potential compromise. Implement rate limiting. Design systems to prevent abuse by limiting the number of requests a user or IP address can make within a given timeframe. Testing and detection. Beyond just code. Detecting insecure design goes beyond simply scanning for code vulnerabilities. It involves security architecture reviews, manual examination of design documents, system diagrams, and data flows by security architects. Threat modeling workshops. Collaborative sessions where development, security, and operations teams brainstorm and identify threats and vulnerabilities based on the design. Business logic testing. Manual penetration testing that specifically targets the application's core business logic, looking for ways to bypass, misuse, or distort intended functionality. Simulated attack scenarios. Running controlled attacks on a design or prototype to validate early assumptions. Key takeaways. Security by design, not by accident. Insecure design is a challenging yet paramount risk because it strikes at the very foundation of an application. It highlights that security is not just about patching bugs or fixing coding errors. It's about thinking securely from the earliest stages of ideation. By prioritizing threat modeling, applying robust security principles, and rigorously reviewing design choices, organizations can build durable, resilient web applications that don't crumble under the weight of unforeseen attacks. A secure design is the bedrock upon which all other security measures can effectively stand. Chapter 7, The Open Backdoor, Unmasking Security Misconfigurations. Imagine you've invested in the best security system for your house. Reinforced doors, unbreakable windows, and motion sensors. But then you forget to change the default code on the alarm system, or you accidentally leave a spare key under the welcome mat, or perhaps you leave an old, rarely used window standing open. Suddenly, all those advanced security features become meaningless. A simple oversight has created a gaping vulnerability. In the digital world, this oversight is known as security misconfiguration. It's ranked as the number 5 risk on the OWASP Top 10 list for 2021, and its prevalence is alarming. Security misconfiguration occurs when software, server, network device, or application settings are not configured securely, either by design, by accident, or through human error. It's like leaving a digital backdoor wide open, inviting attackers to walk right in. How it happens: defaults, omissions, and accidents. Security misconfigurations are often not about complex coding flaws, but rather about a lack of attention to detail during the setup and ongoing maintenance of systems. They can manifest in several ways. Default configurations left unchanged. Many software, operating systems, frameworks, and devices come with default usernames, passwords e.g., admin, root, or services enabled out of the box. If these are not changed, they become trivial for attackers to guess or find through online databases of default credentials. Unnecessary features enabled. Web servers and application platforms often include features, modules, or services that are not required for the application's functionality, e.g., unnecessary development interfaces, debug logging, sample applications, or older, unpatched components. Leaving these enabled expands the attack surface and increases potential vulnerabilities. Improper permissions. Files or directories on servers may have overly permissive read, write, or execute permissions, allowing unauthorized users to view sensitive data, like configuration files, user lists, or unencrypted backups, or even upload malicious scripts. Verbose error messages. Applications configured to display overly detailed error messages, e.g., full-stack traces, database error messages, can inadvertently provide attackers with valuable information about the system's architecture, technologies used, and potential weak points. Cloud misconfigurations. As more organizations move to cloud platforms, like OWASP, Azure, GCP, misconfigured cloud resources have become a major source of breaches. This includes publicly accessible storage buckets, e.g., Amazon S3 buckets, unsecured databases, mismanaged network security groups, or unhardened virtual machines. Missing security headers. Web servers can be configured to send security directives in HTTP headers, like strict transport security, content security policy, X-frame options. Failing to implement these can leave applications open to attacks like cross-site scripting, XSS, or clickjacking. Development test artifacts in production. Sometimes, development or testing environments that are less secure, e.g., with debugging enabled or weaker authentication, get deployed to production without proper hardening, creating immediate vulnerabilities. Real-world examples: the publicly exposed goldmine. One of the most recurring and impactful types of security misconfiguration involves publicly exposed databases. Time and again, security researchers and attackers discover large databases, like MongoDB, Elasticsearch, or Cassandra instances, directly accessible from the internet without any password or authentication. These are often used for development, testing, or analytics, and someone simply forgot to close the door. In 2017 alone, researchers found thousands of such misconfigured databases, containing everything from corporate financial records to healthcare data and personal user information, often leading to companies losing billions of records. Attackers could simply connect to these databases and download or delete their entire contents. Another classic example involves default credentials for IoT devices or network equipment. Thousands of web cameras, smart home devices, and corporate routers have been compromised because their default admin or username password credentials were never changed. This has led to everything from widespread botnets, like Mirai, to direct surveillance and critical network infrastructure compromise. Many high-profile breaches also point to internal security misconfigurations. For instance, an internal administrative dashboard or an API endpoint, meant only for internal use, might be accidentally exposed to the public internet without proper authentication, offering a direct pathway into sensitive internal systems. Impact: a cascade of compromise. A successful security misconfiguration exploit can have devastating results. Data breach: direct, unauthorized access to sensitive data, leading to financial loss, identity theft, and privacy violations. System takeover: attackers gaining administrative control over servers, applications, or network devices, allowing them to install malware, deface websites, or launch further attacks. Denial of service (DoS). Misconfigured services can be easily overloaded or crashed, leading to service unavailability. Lateral movement. Misconfigurations can provide attackers with a critical foothold, allowing them to move deeper into an organization's network and discover more sensitive systems. Reputational damage and regulatory fines. Impact on brand trust, customer churn, and significant legal and financial penalties from data protection authorities. Mitigation strategies. Bolting down every panel. Preventing security misconfigurations requires diligence, automation, and a security-first mindset throughout the entire deployment lifecycle. Secure installation and hardening. Always change default credentials. Every single one. Remove or disable unused features, ports, and services. If you don't need it, disable it. This minimizes the attack surface. Implement hardening guides for all components, web servers, databases, OS frameworks. Many good resources exist, e.g., CIS benchmarks. Principle of least privilege. Configure all services, accounts, and application components with the absolute minimum necessary permissions. If a web server doesn't need to write to the database, don't give it write permissions. Automated security scans and audits. Use automated vulnerability scanners and configuration management tools to regularly scan for misconfigurations. Implement cloud security posture management, CSPM, tools if you're in the cloud, to continuously monitor your cloud configurations against best practices. Patch management. Keep all software, operating systems, frameworks, and libraries up to date with the latest security patches. This mitigates vulnerabilities that attackers might exploit through misconfigurations. Custom error handling. Configure applications to display generic, user-friendly error messages that do not reveal sensitive internal information. Log detailed errors internally, but do not display them to users. Implement strong HTTP security headers. Configure your web server, e.g., Nginx, Apache, IIS, or application framework to send security-enhancing HTTP response headers. Segregate environments. Strictly separate development, test, and production environments. Never use production data in non-production environments unless masked, and ensure production systems have the highest level of security controls. Security baseline and golden images. Create secure, golden images or standardized configurations for virtual machines and containers, ensuring all new deployments start from a known secure state. Testing and detection. The unseen layers. Discovering security misconfigurations often involves configuration audits, manual review of configuration files, manifest files, security group settings, and access policies. Automated scanners. Using tools that can identify common misconfigurations both externally, e.g., exposed services, default public pages, and internally, e.g., insecure file permissions. Penetration testing. Ethical hackers actively seeking out and exploiting misconfigurations as part of their attack simulations. Cloud Security Posture Management, CSPM, continuous monitoring of cloud environments to detect deviations from security best practices. Key takeaways: discipline is your best defense. Security misconfigurations are often considered low-hanging fruit for attackers because they represent obvious, easily exploitable flaws. Avoiding them requires discipline, a clear security policy, and consistent attention to detail across the entire lifecycle of an application and its underlying infrastructure. It's not enough to build a strong house. You must also remember to lock all the doors and windows. By regularly auditing, automating configuration management, and adopting a secure-by-default philosophy, you can prevent these critical backdoors from appearing in your digital systems. Chapter 8, The Weakest Link, Vulnerable and Outdated Components. Imagine you're building a state-of-the-art vehicle. You design the chassis, the engine, and the interior with cutting-edge precision. But then, to save time and money, you decide to use wheels, brakes, and a steering column from a 30-year-old model. Even with the best new designs, the entire vehicle's integrity is now limited by its oldest, weakest parts. A breakdown, or even a catastrophic accident, is almost inevitable. In the world of web applications, this scenario plays out constantly as vulnerable and outdated components. This is the number 6 risk on the OWASP Top 10 list for 2021, highlighting a pervasive problem. Applications are rarely built from scratch anymore. Modern web applications are complex tapestries woven from countless third-party libraries, frameworks, and other software components. If even one of these components contains a known security vulnerability, the entire application becomes vulnerable, acting as the weakest link in the security chain. How it happens. Inherited weakness. Applications typically rely on components for functionalities like JavaScript libraries, for front-end interactivity, e.g., jQuery, React, Angular. Web frameworks. For back-end logic and structure, e.g., Spring, Django, Ruby on Rails, ASP.NET. Database drivers and ORM/S for connecting to and interacting with databases. Authentication and authorization modules. For user management. Utility libraries for logging, data manipulation, file handling, etc. Operating systems and web servers. The foundational software hosting the application, e.g., Linux, Windows Server, Apache, Nginx, IIS. Container images, e.g., Docker images, which bundle applications with their dependencies. Vulnerabilities in these components arise when known vulnerabilities, CVEs. A security flaw is discovered in a component published as a common vulnerability and exposures, CVE, ID, and the application's developers fail to update to a patched version. Outdated versions. Components are left running old versions that are no longer supported, meaning they won't receive security updates even if new vulnerabilities are found. Untrusted sources. Components are downloaded from unofficial or untrusted sources, potentially containing malicious code. Unused components. Developers include components in their application that are not actively used but still present a potential attack surface. Lack of inventory. Development teams don't maintain a clear, up-to-date inventory of all the components, both direct and transitive dependencies, used in their applications, making it impossible to track and patch vulnerabilities. Real-world examples: the domino effect of Log4Shell and Equifax. Two major, recent examples dramatically illustrate the impact of vulnerable and outdated components. Log4Shell, 2021. This was a critical vulnerability. CVE 2021 to 44228. Found in Log4j, a ubiquitous open-source Java logging library. Because Log4j is used in millions of applications, web servers, and enterprise software systems worldwide, its vulnerability meant that an enormous portion of the internet was immediately at risk. Attackers could exploit this flaw to execute arbitrary code on affected systems, leading to widespread compromise. The sheer scale and speed of the attacks underscored how a vulnerability in a single, widely used component could create a global cybersecurity crisis. Equifax data breach, 2017. One of the most infamous data breaches in history, affecting over 147 million consumers, was directly attributed to Equifax's failure to patch a known vulnerability. CVE 2017 to 5638 in the Apache Struts web application framework. This was not a zero-day exploit. The patch had been available for 2 months. Equifax's inaction allowed attackers an easy entry point, leading to the theft of highly sensitive data including social security numbers, dates of birth, and addresses. This incident became a stark reminder of the massive financial, reputational, and personal costs associated with neglecting component security. These examples highlight a critical pattern. Attackers don't always need to find a new, complicated vulnerability. Often, they just need to scan for systems using outdated components with already known vulnerabilities, which are often easier to exploit. Impact. A tiny crack, a major collapse. The consequences of relying on vulnerable components can be devastating. Full system compromise. Attackers can gain control over the entire system, execute arbitrary code, and pivot to other systems within the network, as seen with Log4Shell. Data breach. Sensitive data can be exposed, altered, or destroyed. Denial of service, DoS. Vulnerabilities can be exploited to crash the application or underlying server. Malware distribution. Compromised components can be used to inject malware into the application, which then infects end users. Supply chain attacks. If a component itself is maliciously modified, all applications using that component become compromised. Reputational damage and regulatory fines. Significant costs associated with breach response, legal fees, and loss of customer trust. Mitigation strategies. A stronger chain. Protecting applications from vulnerable components requires a proactive and continuous approach. Maintain a comprehensive inventory. Understand all components, frameworks, and libraries used in your application, including their versions and dependencies, direct and transitive dependencies. This is often achieved via a software bill of materials, SBOM. Regularly patch and update. Implement a robust patch management program. Prioritize critical updates. Stay informed about newly discovered vulnerabilities, CVEs, and their severity. Automate updates. Where possible, automate the process of checking for and applying security updates for your operating system, web server, and application frameworks. Test updates. Always test updates in a non-production environment before deploying to production to ensure compatibility and prevent breakage. Source components securely. Only use components from official, reputable sources, e.g., official package repositories. Verify the integrity of downloaded components using checksums or digital signatures. Remove unused components. If a component isn't actively used, remove it. Less code means a smaller attack surface. Monitor for public vulnerabilities. Subscribe to security advisories, vulnerability databases like NVD National Vulnerability Database, and mailing lists for your chosen components. Use software composition analysis, SCA tools. These automated tools can scan your application's dependencies, identify known vulnerabilities, and alert you when outdated or vulnerable components are detected. They can also help generate SBOMs. Isolate components. Where possible, design your application to run components in isolated environments, e.g., containers, virtual machines, to limit the impact of a compromise. Understand licensing and support. Ensure your components are actively maintained and supported by their developers. Testing and detection. Scanning the software inventory. Detecting vulnerable and outdated components is primarily a task performed by security tools. Software composition analysis, SCA tools. These are purpose-built scanners that analyze your codebase, look for package manager files, e.g., package.json, POM.xml, and cross-reference detected components against vulnerability databases. Vulnerability scanners. Some web application scanners can identify known vulnerabilities in commonly used frameworks and server software. Periodic audits. Manual review of dependency lists and comparison against known vulnerability lists. Key takeaways: your code only as strong as its parts. Vulnerable and outdated components underscore a crucial reality of modern software development. Applications are built standing on the shoulders of giants, and sometimes those giants have weak knees. Developers and organizations must take responsibility for managing the security of their entire software supply chain, not just the code they write themselves. By actively inventorying, monitoring, and aggressively patching all third-party components, you strengthen your web application's weakest links and avoid the devastating domino effect that can be triggered by a single vulnerable part. Chapter 9: Who's Really There? Fixing Identification and Authentication Failures. Imagine a bustling airport security checkpoint. Passengers present their identification, boarding passes are scanned, and then they undergo further screening. This entire process is designed to answer one fundamental question: who are you, and are you allowed to be here? The system ideally ensures that only authorized individuals proceed to their flights. If this system fails, if forged IDs are accepted, or if someone can simply walk through without proper checks, the entire security of the airport is compromised. In the digital world, this critical gatekeeping function is handled by identification and authentication, ID and auth. Your username proves your identity, and your password or other factors proves you are who you claim to be, authentication. When this process breaks down, it's classified under identification and authentication failures, the 7th item on the OWASP Top 10 list for 2021. These failures are often the root cause of data breaches, as they provide attackers with a direct path to masquerade as legitimate users. How it happens: when the gatekeeper fails. ID and auth failures encompass a range of weaknesses related to how an application handles user credentials and sessions. Weak password policies, permitting easily guessable passwords, allowing users to set passwords like password 123, 123,456, or common dictionary words. Lack of complexity requirements, not enforcing minimum length, uppercase, lowercase letters, numbers, or special characters. No strong policies for password changes, allowing users to reuse old passwords or not forcing regular changes. No rate limiting for login attempts, allowing attackers to try an unlimited number of password guesses, brute force attacks. Insufficient multi-factor authentication, MFA. Many systems don't implement MFA, meaning a simple username and password is all that's required. If MFA is implemented, it might be weak, e.g., relying solely on SMS, which can be vulnerable to SIM swapping attacks or not enforced for all users or critical operations. Credential stuffing, brute force attacks. Attackers obtain lists of usernames and passwords from breaches of other websites, which are widely available on the dark web. They then stuff these credentials into login forms, hoping users have reused their passwords across multiple sites. Without proper rate limiting or sophisticated detection, these attacks are often highly successful. Insecure session management, weak session IDs. Session tokens, which keep you logged in, that are predictable, too short, or not sufficiently random, can be guessed by attackers. Unencrypted session IDs. Transmitting session tokens over unencrypted HTTP instead of HTTPS allows attackers to easily capture them. No session expiration. Sessions that never expire mean an attacker can use a stolen session token indefinitely. Improper session termination. Sessions not being invalidated after logout or password change, allowing old sessions to remain active. Improper credential recovery. Password reset or account recovery processes that are poorly designed can be exploited. For example, relying on easily obtainable information, like mother's maiden name or date of birth, for verification, or sending plaintext passwords via email. Real-world examples: when reused passwords cost millions. The impact of ID and auth failures is pervasive. Credential stuffing attacks, one of the most common and devastating issues. For example, a 2018 report found that Marriott International's Starwood hotels suffered a breach where over 500 million customer records were exposed. While the initial entry point was reportedly a misconfigured database, the subsequent widespread compromise of customer accounts was exacerbated by attackers using stolen credentials, likely from other breaches, to access user accounts and pilfer loyalty points. Many individual users found their accounts emptied. Uber, 2016. While complex, a major part of the Uber breach involved the theft of credentials for a cloud-based service, which then led to the exposure of personal data for 57 million riders and drivers. This highlights how vulnerabilities in authentication can be critical entry points. Websites with weak password policies like Password 123. While not a single, massive breach, the collective effect of millions of accounts being compromised due to simple, guessable passwords or lack of MFA is enormous. Attackers automate processes to try common passwords at scale, quickly gaining access to a vast number of accounts. Many online gaming platforms, streaming services, and social media sites have experienced widespread account takeovers due to these vulnerabilities. Impact: the keys to the kingdom. The consequences of abused identification and authentication failures are dire. Account takeover. The most direct impact, leading to unauthorized access to personal data, financial details, or confidential information. Identity theft. Stolen login details can be used to impersonate users across various online services. Financial fraud. Unauthorized purchases, transfers of funds, or manipulation of financial accounts. Data breach espionage. Attackers can gain access to sensitive company data, intellectual property, or classified information. Reputational damage. Loss of customer trust and negative publicity for businesses. Legal and regulatory fines. Non-compliance with data protection regulations that mandate secure authentication. Mitigation strategies. Fortifying the gate. Securing identification and authentication requires comprehensive measures, many of which are now considered standard for any secure web application. Implement strong password policies. Enforce a minimum length, e.g., 12 to 16 characters, and complexity requirements. Disallow commonly used, breached, or dictionary passwords. Check against lists of known compromised passwords. Use strong, slow hashing algorithms, like bcrypt, script, argon2, with per-user salts for storing passwords, as discussed in cryptographic failures. Never store passwords in plaintext. Implement rate limiting for login attempts to prevent brute force and credential stuffing attacks, e.g., locking accounts after 3 to 5 failed attempts or using CAPTCHAs. Enforce multi-factor authentication, MFA. Require users to provide at least 2 distinct factors for authentication. These factors can include something you know, password PIN; something you have, physical token, mobile app, smart card; something you are, biometrics like fingerprint, face ID. Make MFA mandatory for high-value accounts, e.g., administrators, and strongly encourage it for all users. Secure session management. Generate strong, random, and complex session IDs. Transmit all session IDs over HTTPS. Set appropriate session timeouts, e.g., 30 minutes for inactivity on financial sites, longer for less sensitive apps. Invalidate session IDs after logout, password changes, or other security-sensitive events. Ensure session tokens are not exposed in URLs. Secure credential recovery processes. Never send plaintext passwords. Implement secure password reset links that are short-lived and sent to a verified email address. Use strong verification methods that don't rely on easily guessable or publicly available information, e.g., account recovery should ideally leverage MFA. Monitor for suspicious login activities. Implement logging and monitoring for failed login attempts from unusual locations, or excessive login attempts. Alert security teams to potential attacks. Account lockout mechanisms. Implement intelligent account lockout or CAPTCHA challenges to prevent attackers from brute-forcing credentials. Consider passwordless authentication. Explore modern authentication methods like FIDO2/WebAuthn, which remove the need for passwords altogether, significantly reducing the attack surface. Testing and detection. Probing the gaps. Detecting identification and authentication failures involves automated scanners. Can check for weak password policies, lack of HTTPS for login, or obvious session management flaws. Manual penetration testing. An ethical hacker will try various brute force attacks, credential stuffing, session hijacking attempts, and analyze the password reset process. Code review. Examining the application's code for insecure password storage, session handling, and authentication logic. Configuration review. Checking server and application configurations for proper rate limiting and security settings. Key takeaways: your digital identity, your strongest shield. Failure in identification and authentication is a fundamental flaw, allowing attackers to simply step into your shoes. It's not about complex exploits. It's about the basic gatekeepers failing. By implementing strong password policies, multi-factor authentication, secure session management, and diligent monitoring, you can build a robust shield around your users' digital identities. In a world where credentials are the new currency, securing who can access your digital assets is paramount to protecting both your users and your organization. Chapter 10: The Untrustworthy Foundation. Software and Data Integrity Failures. Imagine a highly trusted engineer who has built a secure bridge. It's strong, safe, and reliable. Now imagine that same engineer, later, unknowingly installs a corrupted software update onto the bridge's structural monitoring system. Or, even worse, what if a malicious actor tampered with the original blueprints during construction, introducing hidden weaknesses? In either case, the bridge, despite its outward appearance of safety, now rests on an untrustworthy foundation. Its integrity has been compromised. In the digital realm, this concept is known as software and data integrity failures. This is the 8th critical risk on the OWASP Top 10 list for 2021. It addresses vulnerabilities related to code, updates, and critical data losing its integrity, meaning it has been modified or corrupted in an unauthorized way. This can happen through insecure updates, compromised continuous integration, continuous delivery, CI/CD, pipelines, or unchecked critical data. The core problem is that the system or its data can no longer be trusted to be original, accurate, or untampered with. How it happens: when trust is broken. Software and data integrity failures arise when proper controls are not in place to ensure that code, data, or critical components remain unmodified and originate from trusted sources. This category covers a broad range of issues: insecure software updates, CI/CD pipelines, and supply chains. This is a major area of concern. If an attacker can inject malicious code into a software update mechanism, a build server, a code repository, or a dependency management system, that malicious code can then be distributed to every system that downloads the trusted update. The target then executes the malicious code, believing it to be legitimate software from a trusted vendor. Lack of integrity checks for critical data. When critical business data, e.g., financial transactions, access logs, user permissions, patient records, is manipulated without proper validation and integrity checks, the system's reliability and trustworthiness are undermined. For instance, if an application processes a financial transaction and later does not verify the amount or recipient, it's vulnerable to data integrity attacks. Insecure deserialization. This is a more technical flaw, but a significant one. Deserialization is the process of taking data structures, like objects or data from a file, that have been converted into a stream of bytes, serialized, and reconstructing them back into their original form. If an application deserializes untrusted data without proper validation, an attacker can craft malicious serialized objects that, when deserialized, can trigger arbitrary code execution, denial of service attacks, or privilege escalation. It's like feeding a carefully constructed, poisoned instruction set to the application. Lack of code and configuration integrity. Weaknesses that allow code or configuration files to be modified without detection. This could involve insecure file permissions, lack of code signing, or unverified changes in version control systems. Real-world examples. The supply chain nightmare. The most prominent and impactful example of a software and data integrity failure is the SolarWinds supply chain attack, 2020. SolarWinds, a company that provides IT infrastructure management software, had its Orion software compromised. Attackers were able to inject malicious code into legitimate software updates for Orion. When thousands of SolarWinds customers, including U.S. government agencies and Fortune 500 companies, downloaded and installed these seemingly legitimate updates, they unwittingly installed a backdoor into their own networks. This highly sophisticated attack highlighted the extreme vulnerability of the software supply chain. If attackers can compromise a trusted vendor's build process, they can distribute malware on a massive scale, undetected. Another real-world scenario involves e-commerce price manipulation. An attacker might find a flaw in the application's business logic that allows them to modify the price of an item in their shopping cart. If the application doesn't verify the item's original price again before processing the payment, the integrity of the transaction data is compromised, leading to financial loss for the vendor. This isn't just about client-side manipulation, which can be protected by secure design, as discussed in Chapter 6. It's about the application failing to properly validate the integrity of critical data it's processing. With insecure deserialization, while often less publicly reported than massive breaches, it has been widely exploited in specific cases, including vulnerabilities in popular open-source frameworks like Apache Struts and certain Java applications, leading to remote code execution. Impact: the erosion of trust. The consequences of software and data integrity failures are severe because they undermine the very trust placed in applications and the data they handle. Massive compromise via supply chain. Thousands or millions of systems can be backdoored or infected if the core software's integrity is compromised. Data corruption manipulation. Critical business, data, financial records, inventory, user accounts can be maliciously altered, leading to fraud, financial loss, and severe operational problems. Remote code execution. Attackers can run arbitrary code on the affected server, leading to complete system takeover. Reputational damage. Users and customers lose trust in the integrity of the software and the security of their data. Legal and financial penalties. For organizations, the costs can include forensic investigations, remediation, regulatory fines, and potential lawsuits. Mitigation strategies. Building on solid ground. Protecting against software and data integrity failures requires a multifaceted approach focused on validation, verification, and robust process control. Validate software updates and supply chain integrity. Code signing. Use digital signatures to verify the authenticity and integrity of all software, libraries, and components before deployment. Only allow signed code from trusted sources. Secure dependencies. Vet all third-party libraries and dependencies. Use tools like software composition analysis, SCA, to identify known vulnerabilities and verify their origin. Secure CI/CD pipelines. Implement robust security controls within your development and deployment pipelines, e.g., proper access controls, vulnerability scanning of container images, integrity checks on build artifacts. Source code repository security. Protect your source code repositories from unauthorized access and tampering. Implement data integrity checks. Input validation, revisited. As discussed in Injection, Chapter 5, rigorous input validation is key. But for integrity, it's about validating all data, even if it comes from an internal source or previous steps of a workflow. Checksums and hashing. For critical data, use cryptographic checksums or hashes to detect unauthorized modifications. Periodically verify stored data against these hashes. Transaction controls. For financial or business-critical data, implement robust transaction controls, e.g., all or nothing ACID properties to ensure data consistency. Server-side verification. Always re-verify critical data and business logic decisions on the server side, even if they originated from the client. Secure deserialization practices. Avoid deserializing untrusted data. The safest approach is simply not to deserialize data from untrusted sources and languages that are prone to deserialization flaws. Implement integrity checks. If deserialization is necessary, use integrity checks, e.g., digital signatures, MACs, before deserializing. Restrict object types. Limit the types of objects that can be deserialized. Use secure serialization formats. Where possible, use binary serialization formats that do not allow arbitrary object creation. Version control and configuration management. Use robust version control systems, like Git for all code and configurations, ensuring that all changes are tracked and auditable. Implement strict code review processes. File integrity monitoring, FIM. Implement FIM solutions to detect unauthorized changes to critical system files, application files, and configurations on servers. Testing and detection. Trust but verify. Detecting software and data integrity failures requires a keen eye for suspicious modifications and continuous vigilance. Supply chain audits. Regularly audit your software supply chain, including third-party vendors and their security practices. Automated scanners. Tools capable of detecting insecure deserialization patterns or vulnerabilities in CI/CD pipeline configurations. Code review. Manual review of code for patterns that allow integrity bypasses, especially around data processing and deserialization. Penetration testing. Ethical hackers will specifically target data manipulation, business logic flaws, and supply chain vulnerabilities. Runtime application self-protection, RASP. Technologies that monitor application behavior at runtime and can detect and prevent certain deserialization attacks. Key takeaways. From code to data, trust nothing implicitly. Software and data integrity failures represent a profound challenge because they strike at the heart of trust. Whether it's compromised code delivery through your software supply chain or manipulated financial data, the inability to trust the very foundation of your application is a catastrophic scenario. By implementing rigorous integrity checks, securing your development and deployment pipelines, avoiding insecure deserialization, and maintaining strict vigilance over your software's origin and data's content, you can rebuild that trust and ensure your digital constructions stand on truly solid ground. Chapter 11, Whispers in the Dark, Why Security Logging and Monitoring Failures Matter. Imagine you've installed the most advanced alarm system and surveillance cameras in your home. They meticulously record every entry and exit. But the truth is, nobody is ever watching the live feed. The alarm goes straight to voicemail, and the recorded video footage is deleted every 24 hours. When a burglar quietly bypasses your front door late one night, you wouldn't know until the next morning, when they're long gone and half your possessions are missing. Even then, without those records, you might not be able to piece together what happened, how they got in, or what they took. In the digital world, this failure to see, hear, and recall security events is categorized as security logging and monitoring failures. This is the 9th critical risk on the OWASP Top 10 list for 2021. It speaks to a profound truth: you cannot protect what you cannot see. Without sufficient logging, active monitoring, and timely alerting, even the most sophisticated security measures are like a silent alarm, useless in detecting, responding to, or recovering from a breach. Attackers thrive in the dark, and a lack of proper logging and monitoring keeps your systems shrouded in shadow. How it happens: a blind spot in your digital vision. Security, logging, and monitoring failures aren't usually about attackers directly exploiting a logging function. Instead, they represent a significant omission or oversight in an organization's overall security posture. These failures often stem from insufficient logging. The application or system simply doesn't log enough critical security events. Important actions like successful and failed login attempts, access control failures, input validation errors, data modifications, or administrative changes might not be recorded at all. Lack of context. Even if events are logged, they might lack sufficient detail. For example, a log entry might say user logged in, but fail to record which user, from what IP address, at what time, and using what method. Without this context, forensic analysis is severely hampered. No monitoring or alerting, logs are generated, but no one is actively reviewing them. There are no automated tools, like SIEM systems, to aggregate, correlate, and analyze log data for suspicious patterns. Even if suspicious activity is detected, there are no defined alerts to notify security personnel in real time. No log protection. Logs are not stored securely. They might be stored locally on the same server that an attacker has compromised, allowing the attacker to tamper with or erase audit trails to cover their tracks. Access to logs might not be properly restricted. Insufficient log retention. Log data is deleted too quickly, meaning that by the time a breach is discovered, which can often be months after the initial intrusion, the forensic evidence needed to understand its scope and origin is gone. Dispersed and uncorrelated logs. Different parts of an application or infrastructure, web server, application server, database, firewall log independently to different locations or in different formats. This makes it extremely difficult to piece together a comprehensive view of an attack across multiple systems. Real-world examples: the ignored alarm and the unseen breach. One of the most famous examples of how a lack of effective monitoring can amplify a breach is the Target data breach of 2013. Attackers gained access to Target systems through a third-party vendor. While Target had invested in advanced security tools, including a security information and event management (SIEM) system that did detect and alert on the suspicious activity, the alerts were reportedly ignored by their security team. The SIEM system flagged the malware activity, but it went unaddressed. Consequently, what could have been a contained incident escalated into a massive data theft affecting over 110 million customers. This wasn't a logging failure per se, but a catastrophic monitoring and alerting failure, highlighting that even when the whispers are there, if no one is listening, they have no impact. Many breaches across various industries follow a similar pattern. Organizations discover they've been compromised not through their own security systems, but weeks or months later, often by external notification, e.g., law enforcement, banks detecting fraudulent activity, or a third-party security firm. The long dwell time, the period an attacker is in a system before being detected, directly correlates with poor logging and monitoring, allowing attackers to steal more data and establish deeper footholds. Without proper logs, understanding the true extent of compromise becomes a guessing game. Impact: a recipe for disaster recovery nightmare. The consequences of security logging and monitoring failures are wide-ranging and severe. Undetected breaches. Attackers can operate for extended periods within an organization's network without being noticed, leading to greater data loss and system damage. Slow or failed incident response. Without timely alerts or detailed logs, security teams cannot respond quickly or effectively to incidents, making containment and eradication significantly harder. Poor forensic analysis. When a breach is eventually detected, a lack of comprehensive logs makes it nearly impossible to determine the full scope of the attack, how it occurred, what data was compromised, and how to prevent it from happening again. Compliance violations. Many regulatory frameworks, e.g., GDPR, HIPAA, PCI DSS, mandate robust logging and monitoring for security-sensitive data. Failures can lead to significant fines and legal repercussions. Erosion of trust. Stakeholders, customers, partners, regulators lose trust in an organization's ability to protect their data. Mitigation strategies. Illuminating the shadows. Effective security logging and monitoring requires a strategic approach, treating logs as a first-class security asset, Define what to log. Collaboratively decide what events are security relevant. At a minimum, log all failed and successful authentication attempts. All access control failures, e.g., attempts to access unauthorized resources. Input validation failures and unusual input patterns. Changes to user accounts, roles, or permissions. System errors, warnings, and critical application events. Data modifications or access to sensitive data stores. Component and configuration changes. Ensure sufficient detail and context. Log entries should provide enough information to understand the who, what, when, where, and how of an event. Include timestamps, user IDs, source IP addresses, HTTP methods, and relevant error codes. Implement centralized logging and SIEM. Collect logs from all relevant sources, application, web server, database, firewall, operating system, into a centralized log management system or a security information and event management SIEM solution. SIEMs are crucial for correlating events across different systems and detecting complex attack patterns. Protect log integrity and availability. Logs must be protected from tampering or deletion by attackers. Store them on separate, hardened systems with strict access controls. Ensure logs are immutable or append-only. Encrypt sensitive information within logs, though avoid logging sensitive data in plaintext in the first place. Establish real-time monitoring and alerting. Define baselines for normal activity and set up alerts for deviations, e.g., too many failed logins from a single IP, unexpected administrator activity, large data transfers, unrecognized external IP addresses accessing internal systems. Integrate alerts with incident response procedures, ensuring the right people are notified immediately. Implement robust log retention policies. Retain logs for a sufficient period to meet regulatory requirements and support forensic investigations, usually months to years, depending on the data sensitivity and industry regulations. Regularly review and test. Periodically review logs to ensure they are being generated correctly and are providing valuable information. Test your alerting mechanisms regularly by simulating suspicious events to ensure they trigger as expected. Practice your incident response plan to ensure your team can effectively use the available log data. Testing and detection. Listening for the signals. Identifying security logging and monitoring failures involves security audits, reviewing logging policies, configurations, and procedures against best practices and compliance requirements. Penetration testing, actively trying to perform actions that should be logged and then checking if they appear in the logs. Testers also try to tamper with or erase logs. Log analysis tools, using SIEM systems or log aggregators to find gaps in data, inconsistency across logs, or signs of log tampering. Incident response drills, exercises where the effectiveness of logging and monitoring in a simulated breach scenario is tested. Key takeaways: the eyes and ears of your digital fortress. Security, logging, and monitoring are not merely compliance checkboxes. They are the eyes and ears of your defending force. They provide critical real-time awareness, enabling rapid detection and response to attacks, and invaluable historical data for forensic analysis and continuous improvement. Neglecting this crucial aspect leaves your applications vulnerable, making compromise easier to achieve and far more difficult to contain. By transforming your logs from whispers in the dark into clear, actionable intelligence, you equip your digital fortress with the indispensable ability to see and react to danger. Chapter 12, The Unseen Messenger, Server-Side Request Forgery, SSRF, explained. Imagine you have a highly trusted assistant inside your office. This assistant has access to many internal services, like a private document server or a secure internal configuration panel that the outside world cannot reach. Your assistant is very diligent and will fetch information for you if you tell them the address of the data you need. Normally, you'd ask them to go to public websites to retrieve information, like, please get me the latest news from globalnews.com. Now, what if a malicious outsider could trick your assistant into fetching a document from your private document server, or even trying to access your internal secure configuration panel by cleverly disguising the request? The assistant, operating entirely within its trusted environment, would innocently fulfill the request, believing it's going to a legitimate external address, when in reality, it's making a request on your behalf to something internal and sensitive. This digital deception is called server-side request forgery, SSRF. It's the 10th and final risk on the OWASP Top 10 list for 2021. SSRF is a powerful vulnerability that allows an attacker to make a server-side application, the assistant, in our analogy, send arbitrary or malicious network requests on behalf of the attacker. Because these requests originate from the target server, they often bypass firewalls and other internal network access controls, allowing attackers to exploit internal systems that are otherwise inaccessible from the outside. How it happens. When the server becomes a pawn, SSRF vulnerabilities occur when a web application processes user-supplied input, like a URL, to fetch content from a remote resource, but fails to adequately validate that input. The server then interprets and makes a request to the provided URL, thinking it's benign. The key ways this unfolds are unvalidated URL input. Applications often allow users to provide a URL to fetch data. Common examples include image processing services that download images from a user-provided URL, PDF generators that convert web pages from a URL into PDFs, webhooks or notification services that send data to a user-defined endpoint, server-side import functions that fetch data from third-party APIs. If the application doesn't strictly check the provided URL, an attacker can specify an internal IP address, like 127.0.0.1 for the local server, or 192.168xx for the internal network or specific protocols, like file, // to read local files, or gopher, / for more complex requests. Abusing trust relationships. Once an attacker gets the target server to make requests, they can exploit the server's inherent trust within its own network. For example, a web server might be able to access internal databases, API endpoints, or cloud metadata services, like AWS EC2 instance metadata, which can contain sensitive credentials that are blocked from direct external access by firewall rules. SSRF essentially turns the targeted server into a proxy for the attacker, bypassing firewalls and network segmentation. Since the forged request originates from the legitimate server, firewalls that typically block external access to internal resources will often permit the request because it's coming from an internal source. Real-world examples: the Capital One breach, one of the most high-profile and costly breaches that directly involved an SSRF vulnerability, was the Capital One data breach in 2019. A former Amazon Web Services, AWS, employee was accused of exploiting an SSRF vulnerability in a misconfigured firewall application that Capital One was using. This application was running on an OWASP EC2 instance. The SSRF vulnerability allowed the attacker to trick the web application into making requests to the AWS EC2 instance's metadata service. The EC2 metadata service provides information about the running instance, including temporary security credentials that grant access to other OWASP resources. By exploiting the SSRF flaw, the attacker was able to retrieve these credentials. With these highly privileged credentials, the attacker then gained access to Capital One's Amazon S3 storage buckets, which stored vast amounts of sensitive customer data, including names, addresses, phone numbers, self-reported income, and social security numbers for over 100 million people. This case starkly illustrates how an SSRF vulnerability, even in a seemingly peripheral application, can be leveraged to gain deep access into an organization's most sensitive data stores by a determined attacker, especially within cloud environments. Impact: the server as a traitor. The consequences of a successful SSRF attack can be severe. Access to sensitive internal resources. Attackers can read sensitive internal files, access internal APIs, databases, or other services not exposed to the public internet. Data exfiltration. Sensitive data stored on the internal network can be retrieved and leaked. Port scanning and network mapping. The attacker can use the vulnerable server to scan internal network ports, identifying other live systems and services that might be vulnerable. Bypassing security controls. Firewalls and network segmentation designed to protect internal systems are rendered useless for requests originating from the compromised server. Remote code execution, indirect. In some cases, SSRF can be chained with other vulnerabilities, e.g., misconfigurations in an internal service, to achieve remote code execution on the server or other internal systems. DoS or resource exhaustion. Attackers can force the sensitive server to make too many requests to external services, potentially leading to denial of service attacks against those services or exhausting the server's resources. Credential theft. As seen with Capital One, SSRF can lead to the theft of temporary cloud credentials, granting wide access to cloud resources. Reputational damage and financial loss. The breach can result in significant financial penalties, legal costs, and severe reputational damage. Mitigation strategies. Clipping the server's wings. Preventing SSRF requires strict input validation and strong network controls, ensuring the server only communicates with truly intended safe destinations. Whitelist-based input validation. This is the most effective defense. Instead of trying to block bad URLs, only allow known good URLs. If your application only needs to fetch images from example.com, then explicitly whitelist example.com and nothing else. All other URLs should be rejected. This is much stronger than trying to blacklist internal IP ranges, which attackers can often bypass with IP address variations or URL shorteners. Sanitize and validate user-supplied URLs. If whitelisting is not feasible, e.g., an application needs to fetch from many different public domains, ensure thorough validation of the URL scheme, host, port, and path. Reject private IP addresses, loopback addresses, 127.0.0.1, and non-HTTP protocols, file, //gopher, //. Implement network segmentation. Isolate the server that processes user-supplied URLs into a separate network segment, or DMZ, demilitarized zone. Apply strict firewall rules to this segment, allowing it to communicate only with the specific public resources it absolutely needs to. Prevent outgoing connections to internal IP addresses or sensitive ports. Disable unnecessary protocols. Configure the server application to use only the required URL schemes, e.g., restrict it to HTTP, HTTPS only. Disable other potentially dangerous schemes like file, // gopher, // or FTP, / if not essential. Authenticate internal services. Ensure all internal services, APIs, databases, etc., accessed by the server require authentication, even if they are within a trusted network. This adds a layer of defense in case an SSRF attack bypasses network controls. Implement the principle of least privilege. Configure the application and the server it runs on with the minimum necessary permissions to perform their function. This limits the blast radius if an SSRF attack is successful. Logging and monitoring. Log all outgoing requests made by the server application, including the destination URL, and monitor these logs for suspicious activity, e.g., attempts to connect to internal IP addresses, unusual ports, or sensitive cloud metadata endpoints. Testing and detection, finding the loopholes. Detecting SSRF vulnerabilities typically involves manual penetration testing. Security testers will systematically experiment with passing various internal IP addresses, loopback addresses, different URL schemes, and cloud metadata service URLs as input to any feature that accepts a URL. They will use techniques to bypass basic filtering. Automated scanners. Some advanced web vulnerability scanners can identify potential SSRF entry points by analyzing how the application processes URL inputs. Code review. Examining the application's code for instances where user-supplied URLs are used to fetch resources without proper validation and sanitization. Key takeaways. Not all URLs are created equal. SSRF can turn an otherwise well-protected server into a dangerous weapon pointed back at an organization's own internal infrastructure. It highlights the critical importance of being extremely cautious about any user-supplied input that dictates where a server should make network connections. By rigorously validating and sanitizing all user-provided URLs using a whitelist approach, combined with strong network segmentation and authentication for internal services, you can prevent your server from becoming an unseen messenger for attackers. This vigilance is crucial for securing your internal network from external threats that leverage your own trusted systems. Chapter 13. Beyond the Top 10, Continuously Evolving Your Security Posture. We've embarked on a comprehensive journey through the OWASP Top 10, dissecting the most common and critical web application security risks. We've explored everything from the fundamental failures in access control and authentication to the perils of injecting malicious commands, the hidden dangers of insecure design, and the subtle threats posed by vulnerable components or log failures. You now possess a solid foundational understanding of the greatest hits of web application vulnerabilities. However, the digital landscape is not static. It's a constantly shifting battleground where new technologies emerge, attack techniques evolve, and the motivations of adversaries change. Relying solely on the OWASP Top 10, while an excellent starting point, is like training for a specific set of known obstacles. You also need agile skills to adapt to unforeseen challenges. To truly secure your web applications, you must move beyond the top 10 and embrace a philosophy of continuous security improvement and adaptation. This chapter will discuss broader cybersecurity concepts and emerging trends that complement your understanding of the OWASP Top 10, ensuring your security posture remains robust in the face of an ever-evolving threat landscape. The dynamic threat landscape. The threat landscape is shaped by several factors that are constantly in motion. New technologies, the adoption of new frameworks, languages, cloud services, microservices architectures, serverless computing, and artificial intelligence. AI introduces new attack vectors and vulnerabilities that might not be fully understood or categorized yet. Evolving attack techniques. Attackers continually refine their methods, finding new ways to exploit existing vulnerabilities, chain multiple weaknesses for greater impact, or discover entirely new classes of flaws. Increased automation in attacks. Tools and automation are making it easier, faster, and cheaper for a wider range of attackers to exploit known weaknesses at scale. Sophistication of adversaries. Nation-states, organized cybercrime groups, and highly skilled independent hackers are constantly raising the bar for attack sophistication. Shifting regulatory demands. Governments and industry bodies are introducing new data privacy laws, like CCPA, HIPAA, NDB, etc., and cybersecurity regulations, requiring organizations to meet higher standards of protection and accountability. Essential concepts beyond the top 10. To build a resilient security posture, consider these overarching concepts. Defense in depth. This military strategy translates perfectly to cybersecurity. Instead of relying on a single impenetrable barrier, you build multiple layers of security controls throughout your system. If one layer fails, another is there to catch the attack. For example, robust application security, addressing the top 10, should be complemented by strong network security, firewalls, segmentation, endpoint security, antivirus, EDR, and identity management. Zero trust. This principle fundamentally shifts security from an implicit trust model to an explicit one. Instead of trusting users or devices within a network perimeter, zero trust assumes breach and verifies every request, regardless of its origin. It operates on the mantra, never trust, always verify. This involves strict identity verification, device authentication, and least privilege access for all resources. Security automation and orchestration. The sheer volume of security events, complex configurations, and the need for rapid response demand automation. Security automation and orchestration. SAO tools help automate repetitive security tasks, streamline incident response workflows, and enable faster vulnerability management. Human factor. Technologies are only as strong as the people who design, build, and use them. Social engineering attacks, phishing, pretexting, bypass technical controls by exploiting human psychology. Regular security awareness training for all employees, from the mailroom to the boardroom, is crucial. This includes developers learning secure coding practices and users understanding how to identify phishing attempts. DevSecOps. This philosophy integrates security practices into every phase of the software development lifecycle, SDLC, from design and development to testing, deployment, and operations. Instead of security being a bottleneck, it becomes a shared responsibility that's automated and continuous. Tools like static application security testing, SAST, dynamic application security testing, DAST, and software composition analysis, SCA, are integrated into development pipelines. Incident response and disaster recovery. Even the most secure applications can be breached. A well-defined and regularly practiced incident response plan outlines how to identify, contain, eradicate, recover from, and learn from a security incident. A disaster recovery plan ensures business continuity in the face of major disruptions. Threat intelligence. Staying ahead of attackers requires understanding their capabilities, motivations, and common tactics, techniques, and procedures, TTPS. Threat intelligence involves gathering and analyzing information about potential threats to improve defensive strategies proactively. Cloud security. As applications migrate to the cloud, understanding the shared responsibility model is critical. While cloud providers secure the infrastructure, you are responsible for securing your data and applications within their environment. This requires expertise in cloud-specific security configurations, identity and access management, IAM, and compliance. Emerging considerations for web application security. API security. Modern applications increasingly rely on application programming interfaces, APIs, for communication. APIs now represent a larger attack surface than traditional web GUIs. While many OWASP top 10 principles apply, dedicated API security testing and best practices, like API rate limiting, robust authentication for every API call, and schema validation, are crucial. Container and Kubernetes security. The rise of containerization, Docker, and orchestration platforms, Kubernetes, introduces new security considerations related to container image vulnerabilities, runtime security, network policies, and proper configuration of the orchestration platform itself. Serverless security. Serverless functions, like AWS Lambda, simplify deployment but shift some security responsibilities. Developers must focus on secure function code, proper IAM roles, and understanding the security implications of triggers and integrations. AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, ML, in security. AI is being used both defensively, for advanced threat detection, anomaly scoring, automated vulnerability scanning, and offensively, for generating more sophisticated attack payloads, bypassing CAPTCHAs, or creating realistic deepfakes for social engineering. Understanding its dual role is vital. Supply chain attacks, advanced. Beyond just vulnerable components, Chapter 8, this involves sophisticated attacks that compromise elements deeper in the software or hardware supply chain, as seen in the SolarWinds incident. Verifying the integrity of every part of your software build and delivery process is becoming paramount. Your role in continuous security improvement. Regardless of your specific role, you have a part to play. For developers, embrace secure coding principles, participate in threat modeling, educate yourself on new attack techniques, and integrate security tools into your development workflow. For business owners, executives, recognize security as a business imperative, allocate adequate resources, foster a security-aware culture, and demand security from your vendors. For security professionals, stay updated on emerging threats, champion automation, guide developers, and constantly measure and improve your organization's security posture. For end users, practice good digital hygiene, be skeptical of suspicious communications, and demand strong security from the services you use. The OWASP Top 10 provides a powerful lens through which to view web application security. It illuminates the most common pitfalls and offers clear pathways to avoid them. But true security is not a destination, it's a journey. By understanding the broader cybersecurity landscape, embracing concepts like defense in depth and zero trust, automating security where possible, and continuously adapting to new challenges, you move beyond mere compliance and build applications that are genuinely resilient against the threats of today and tomorrow. The next and final chapter will serve as a call to action, outlining your enduring role in building a safer digital future. Chapter 14, Your Role in a Secure Digital Future. A call to action. We have journeyed through the intricate landscape of web application security, guided by the compass of the OWASP Top 10. We dissected the critical flaws that so often lead to devastating breaches, from the fundamental weaknesses of broken access control to the clandestine mischief of server-side request forgery. We explored how cryptography, when misapplied, can reveal secrets, how integrity failures can contaminate trust, and how a lack of logging can leave us blind in the face of attack. And in our last chapter, we looked beyond the immediate threats, recognizing that the digital frontier is ever expanding, demanding continuous adaptation and a holistic approach to security. If there's one overarching truth to take away from this exploration, it's this: web security is no longer an optional add-on or a niche concern for a select few. It is a foundational requirement, a shared responsibility, and a continuous endeavor for every single person who interacts with the digital world. Whether you are a casual internet user, a budding developer, an entrepreneur, a business leader, or a seasoned cybersecurity professional, you have a vital role to play in building a safer digital future. For the digital citizen, every user, your most powerful tools are awareness and vigilance. Be a smart digital user. The web applications you use are only as secure as their weakest link, and sometimes that link is you. Practice strong password hygiene, long, unique, complex passwords for every site, and always enable multi-factor authentication, MFA, wherever it's offered. It's your single best defense against account takeover. Skepticism is your shield. Be wary of unsolicited emails, suspicious links, and urgent requests for personal information. These are often phishing attempts designed to trick you. If it feels off, it probably is. Keep your software updated. This applies to your operating system, web browser, and all applications on your devices. Updates often contain crucial security patches. Demand security. As consumers, your choices influence the market. Support businesses and services that prioritize your security and privacy. For the digital creator, developers, engineers, designers, you are the architects and builders of the digital future. The quality of your craftsmanship directly impacts the safety of millions. Embrace security by design. Don't treat security as an afterthought. Integrate it from the very beginning of the design phase, considering threat models and secure by default principles. Practice secure coding. Understand and apply the mitigation strategies discussed for each of the OWASP Top 10 risks. Never trust user input. Always validate and sanitize. Use established security libraries and frameworks, and avoid rolling your own crypto or security solutions. Automate security. Integrate security testing tools, SAST, DAST, SCA, into your development pipelines. Make security a continuous part of your DevSecOps process, not a separate gate at the end. Stay informed and learn continuously. The threat landscape changes rapidly. Keep up to date with new vulnerabilities, secure coding practices, and emerging technologies. For the digital steward, business leaders, managers, decision makers, you set the tone, allocate resources, and bear the ultimate responsibility for data protection and operational resilience. Prioritize security as a business imperative. Security is not solely a technical cost. It is an investment in trust, reputation, and long-term viability. Make it a core value, not just a compliance checkbox. Foster a security-aware culture. Educate all employees about best practices and the risks they face. Empower your security teams and encourage collaboration between development, operations, and security. Allocate resources. Ensure your teams have the necessary tools, training, and personnel to build, test, and maintain secure applications and infrastructure. Understand your supply chain. Be diligent about the security practices of your third-party vendors and the open-source components you rely on. The future is secure together. The journey through the OWASP Top 10 is fundamentally about understanding vulnerabilities. But true security isn't just about patching individual holes. It's about shifting mindsets, adopting a culture of continuous improvement, and recognizing the interconnectedness of our digital lives. Every line of code written, every configuration set, every update installed, and every click made holds a potential impact on the collective security of the web. The digital world offers unparalleled opportunities, but with great power comes great responsibility. By internalizing the lessons of this book, by continuously learning, and by actively participating in the ongoing effort to build and use secure web applications, you contribute directly to a safer, more trustworthy, and more resilient digital future for us all. The digital frontier is exciting, vast, and full of promise. Let's ensure it is safe,